This is Walter Bosley, and I'm going to read a short selection from the 1954 book, The Tibetan Book of the Great Liberation, edited by W.Y. Evans-Wentz. Tantric Buddhism. Padmasambhava, having come to be regarded by his many devotees throughout Tibet, Mongolia, China, Nepal, Kashmir, Bhutan, and Sikkim, as being peculiarly a tantric emanation or reincarnation of the Buddha Gautama, exercised a very profound influence on the shaping of Mahayana Buddhism. And this influence, in its own sphere of tantricism, was probably as far-reaching as was that of Nagarjuna in the shaping of the doctrine of the voidness, as set forth in the canonical Prana Paramita. Tantricism itself, in its two aspects, Hindu and Buddhist, is as yet too little investigated to make possible at this time incontrovertible or exhaustive statements concerning its origin, which, however, seems to have been exceedingly complex. According to some scholars who have looked into the problem more or less superficially, the Yogacara school, which originated under Asanga, a Buddhist monk of Gandhara, now Peshawar, in northwest India, presumably about AD 500, appears to have leavened the Mahayana as a whole. In other words, the method of attaining ecstatic union with the one mind, or absolute consciousness, known as yoga, which Patanjali, in his Yoga Sutras, first systematized about the year 150 BC, being the basis of Yogashara. Yoga is undoubtedly one of the chief roots of Tantricism. From this point of view, we should perhaps be justified in defining Tantricism as being a school of eclectic esotericism based fundamentally upon yoga practically applied, both to esoteric Brahmanism and to esoteric or Mahayana Buddhism. Another of the peculiarities of Tantricism, which distinguishes it from all other living cults, is its personification of the dual aspects of the procreative forces in nature, the Shakta, representing the male or positive aspect, and the Shakti, representing the female or negative aspect. As a direct outcome of this, there appear to have developed within the Mahayana the Vajrayana and the Mantrayana schools, which represent a blending with the earlier Yogashara school. By the middle of the 7th century AD, when Tantricism was well established in India, both in its Shaivaic or Hindu and its Buddhistic form, the many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and corresponding Hindu deities and saints were already being imaged there, each with an appropriate female energy or Shakti. And that peculiar esotericism, which is inseparable from Tantricism, was already highly evolved. It was this form of Tantric Buddhism which Padmasambhava introduced into Tibet during the second half of the 8th century. Then, as is believed, early in the second half of the 10th century, the Kalachakra form of Tantricism was more or less developed in northern India, Kashmir, and Nepal. The Kalachakra doctrine is said to have originated in the mysterious secret land of Shambhala. According to the late Sarat Chandra Das, Shambhala was a city said to have been located near the river Oxus in Central Asia. And the Kalachakra had become a distinctly Buddhistic system by the 11th century and introduced the cult of the Adi, or primordial Buddha. In India, varieties of the cult assigned to Shiva or to Ganesha, as the Hindu god of wisdom, the position of Adi Buddha. Possibly, as we venture to suggest, one source, if not the most primitive source, of the Kalachakra system may yet be discovered to have been in the ancient pre-Buddhistic Bon religion of Tibet. If so, the seed of the system already lay in the Tibetan mind and found in Padmasambhava's form of Tantricism a favorable environment, long before the time when the Kalachakra as a distinct school of Buddhism is believed to have arisen in countries adjacent to Tibet. The association of the Kalachakra system with Shambhala, which many lamas say is somewhere unknown in Tibet or to the north of Tibet, is significant in this connection. Furthermore, and of greater importance, is the documentary evidence from original Tibetan sources, as set forth in the Bardo Thodol and in the text of the Shod Rite, represented in Book 5 of Tibetan Yoga and Secret Doctrines, that long before the rise of Tibetan Tantric Buddhism, the ancient Bon faith of Tibet propounded a highly developed cult of wrathful demons, of which the Towo and the Drogpo, corresponding to the Bhairava and Heruka of Hindu Tantricism, are outstanding representatives. And within the very elaborate demonology of the Bon faith probably lie the prototypes not only of the wrathful, but also of the peaceful deities of Tibetan Tantricism. In the Kalachakra system, the inscrutable powers which work through nature, bringing into manifestation universes and then absorbing them, and causing men to live and die, are personified not only in their dual aspect by the Shakta and Shakti, as in the older Tantricism, but also in their dual functions of preservation, represented in Hinduism by Vishnu, and destruction, represented in Hinduism by Shiva. Thus there came into Tantricism two new groupings of deified personifications, one being the order of peaceful deities, personifying the powers making for preservation, the other being that of the wrathful deities, personifying the powers making for destruction. And, as will be observed throughout the epitome of the biography, in Tibetan Buddhism, all Buddhas, bodhisattvas, gods and goddesses, and lesser deities are visualized or represented in both the peaceful and wrathful aspect. Today, the form of Tantricism most prominent in Tibet is the Vajrayana, or Path of the Indomitable Thunderbolt of the Gods. If the compilation of the biography be really that of Padma's disciple, the Tibetan lady Yeshe Chogyal, who was contemporaneous with him then, as the biography's internal evidence indicates, the Vajrayana form of Tantricism was already highly developed by the latter half of the 8th century, and also the Kalachakra system, into which the Mantrayana and Vajrayana practices were eventually incorporated. If, on the other hand, the biography is of later date than the colophon assigns to it, and the presumption that the Kalachakra system was unknown to Tantricism prior to the 10th century is sound, the Tantricism of the biography must therefore be taken to be a form more highly developed than that introduced into Tibet by Padmasambhava himself. The true date of the biography will, no doubt, eventually be established, and then, when the biography and similar biographical records of the great guru have been critically examined, much new evidence will be adduced to clarify our present uncertainties concerning Tantricism's origin. Whatever be the origin or age of Tantricism, it has unquestionably been an influence of the first importance throughout the whole empire of Mahayana Buddhism. Our illustration of the Chinese tantric representation of Manjushri in wrathful aspect is significant of this influence in China, and that of Manjushri in peaceful aspect is significant of this influence in India, Tibet, Nepal, and other of the Himalayan regions culturally related thereto. Philosophically viewed, Tantricism, Hindu as well as Buddhist, aims to interpret human nature pragmatically. For this reason, the Tantra Shastra, historically the latest of the Shastras, is held to be the Shastra best fitted for the Kali Yuga, the present age. Unlike most other faiths, Tantricism teaches understanding and sublimation of the chief force active in humanity, namely, the reproductive force, and opposes the more prevalent and scientifically unsound teaching concerning the forcible suppression of it. By that all-important force in nature, birth is balanced with death. The current of the pranic river of life, whereby all worlds and suns are sustained, is kept flowing, and the growth from higher to lower states of consciousness, even to the final emancipation of Buddhahood, is made possible. Thus it is that Tantricism propounds a science of sex, such as the late Sir John Woodruff, the pseudonym of Arthur Avalon, suggested in the Tantra of the Great Liberation, in the Serpent Power, and in Shakti and Shakta. Even our own Occidental science has now discovered, as the scientists of the Orient discovered long ago, that there is direct relationship between the highest mental and psychic powers in mankind and the secretions of the sex glands, and that physical youthfulness and efficiency are dependent upon conservation of the reproductive essences. All religions, likewise, even the most primitive, have recognized that there is inseparableness between the sex energy and spiritual growth. In the early Christian church, the ruling that a sexually incomplete man could not fittingly serve the church as a priest was made a basis for deposing the learned and saintly Origen of Alexandria from presbyterial status. Having applied literally rather than esoterically the New Testament command referring to the cutting off of an offending member of the physical body, Origen, at the age of 21, had made himself a eunuch physically rather than spiritually. Similarly, Indian gurus now teach that to attain the bliss of samadhi, the sexual power must be complete and active, yet sublimated, and under as complete control as an aeroplane by its pilot. In the Occident, the Society of Jesus equally insists that candidates for its priesthood must have attained dominion over their sexuality. But for the Oriental yogin, mastery of serpent power, so to speak, does not imply celibacy in the Christian monastic sense, for many of the great rishis of India had offspring. And today, as in the time of Padmasambhava, tantric priests or lamas may or may not marry, celibacy for them being optional. But it is only the Nyagpa among the Nyingmapa lamas of Padmasambhava's school who commonly marry. Marpa, the guru of Milarepa, for example, was married and had a son. The Bodhisattva Gautama, too, before he became the Buddha, was married and had a son. And both the son and the wife became faithful disciples of the Enlightened One. It is because sex plays so large a part in the various accounts of Padmasambhava which have been handed down that he is looked upon by many who misunderstand Tantricism as the very antithesis of what a holy man should be. The standards by which such critics judge the great guru are those of the unenlightened, and usually those of the Occident. In his own time, such critics were not lacking, as the episode concerning the suspicions of one who had professed to be his friend shows. Therefore, without at least some general comprehension of Padmasambhava's Tantricism, such as the present section affords, this volume as a whole is apt to be misinterpreted. That was a selection from the Tibetan Book of the Great Liberation, edited by W. Y. Evans-Wentz, and with commentary by Carl Jung.